Welcome to It Begins in Quincy.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, we are jumping right in today. So I want you to imagine your city gets hit by just a catastrophic 100-year coastal flood.
Right, like a massive weather event.
Exactly. We are talking, $10 million in infrastructural damages. Neighborhoods are completely underwater.
The power grid goes down.
The power grid is compromised. Maybe you've got hazardous materials leaking from industrial zones. Just a total nightmare scenario.
Yeah, a real disaster.
Right. So when the water finally recedes, who is the person responsible for securing the federal funds to actually rebuild your neighborhood?
It's a huge logistical question.
It is. Who writes the FEMA grants or, coordinates the state and federal agencies? Who makes sure the hazard mitigation plans are legally compliant so the city just doesn't go bankrupt?
Well, the answer to that is the Director of Emergency Management.
Exactly. The Director of Emergency Management. Now, I want you to imagine your newly elected city council hauls that exact person into a televised public hearing, and they just fire him on the spot.
On live TV.
On live TV. And not because he failed at his job during the disaster. Right. Not because the department is over budget.
Which would be the normal reasons.
Right. They do it to save you, the individual taxpayer, literally the price of a single cup of coffee.
Wow.
And they do it all in service of settling a 10-year-old personal grudge from the public gallery.
And it brings up a really profound question about the fragility of municipal power. Because, when you cast a ballot in a local election, you're essentially engaging in a very old, very fragile philosophical agreement.
Right, the social compact.
Ah, yeah. The state constitution.
Yes. It explicitly points us to the preamble to the Massachusetts Constitution. And it brings up this concept, like I said, of the social compact.
But we rarely stop to actually think about the immense weight it carries. I mean, John Adams, when he was drafting that Constitution, he didn't frame the establishment of local government as a business transaction.
Right, or just some simple administrative bureaucracy.
Exactly. He framed it as a spiritual duty of power.
A spiritual duty. That's heavy.
It is. The preamble essentially dictates that a faithful execution of government requires ensuring that every single citizen finds their baseline physical and economic security within the law.
Right, so it isn't just about, making sure the parking meters work or whatever.
No, not at all.
The social compact is basically the covenant that we, the people, hand over our resources, like our tax dollars.
And a monopoly on authority.
Yes, to our elected officials. And in exchange for that power, they hold this sacred binding duty to protect the common good.
Right. Their job is not to settle personal scores.
Definitely not.
It is not to play asymmetrical political warfare. Their fundamental mandate is to protect life, property, and the safety of the community.
Which brings us to the reality of local politics, because municipal government relies almost entirely on norms to uphold that compact, right?
It really does. We tend to think of laws as these ironclad protections.
Like force fields or something.
Right. But at the local level, the system really only functions because people agree to behave like adults.
Yeah, that's the scary part.
And when that covenant is functioning correctly, it is a truly incredible, vital thing to witness. So to establish a baseline for our analysis today, we really need to look at what the peak of that social compact looks like in reality.
We need a snapshot of functionality before things go off the rails.
Exactly.
So let's paint that picture for you, the listener. We are going to go to the Quincy City Council chambers, and the date is May 19th, 2025.
May 19th. Keep that date in mind.
Yes. And I want you to really visualize the tone of this room, because the contrast with what comes later is going to give you absolute whiplash.
It really is a night and day difference.
So standing proudly before the room on May 19th, 2025 is a guy named David McCarthy.
Right.
And at this time in 2025, he's the sitting Ward 1 city councilor. He's been a public servant for decades, serving on the Quincy School Committee from 2004.
And then as a city councilor from 2018 onward.
Right. But on this specific night, he isn't standing at the podium to debate like a zoning variance.
Or argue over an intersection layout.
No. He has brought forward a formal citation to honor a group of first responders. He's formally recognizing Police Officer Stephen Kelly, Lieutenant Michael Duran, the Quincy Fire Department, and the Brewster Ambulance Team.
And the inciting incident behind this recognition is just objectively incredible.
It's an amazing story.
According to the meeting minutes, exactly a month prior, so April 15th, 2025, These men and women responded to an emergency call at 82 Winthrop Street.
In a neighborhood called Hosmeck, right?
Yes, a woman was in labor, and she was in extreme immediate distress. I mean, there was no time to get to a hospital.
Oh, wow. So they're doing this on the fly.
Exactly. This was a highly volatile life or death medical emergency happening right there in a residential home.
And this is where the mechanics of local government become very, very real to the average person.
Right, because when you call for help in a scenario like that, you are relying on this invisible web of coordination.
The police arrive first, usually, right, to secure the scene and provide initial trauma response.
Yep. And then the fire department arrives with the heavy medical equipment and the manpower.
And then Brewster Ambulance, the EMS team, they arrive with this specialized pre-hospital pediatric and maternity care.
And they all arrived rapidly. They communicated seamlessly across all these different departmental frequencies. And they safely delivered a healthy baby boy right there on the scene under incredibly urgent circumstances.
I mean, when you read the transcript of Councilor McCarthy actually presenting the citation, the tone of the chamber is almost reverent. You feel the absolute joy and the profound respect in his words. He doesn't just, read their names off a list.
No, he talks about their exceptional professionalism, their composure under extreme pressure.
And their compassion for the family. He calls it an extraordinary moment of life and community care.
He says on the record that what could have been a deeply stressful and uncertain tragedy became a moment of joy and celebration solely made possible by the calm expertise of these first responders.
If we connect this to the bigger picture.
Yes, exactly.
It is the covenant fulfilled in real time. You have the legislative body, right, the city council, formally recognizing the tactical execution of public safety.
The police chief is at the podium. The fire department command staff is being thanked. Photos are being taken.
Everyone is smiling.
The entire council is united in applause. This is exactly what you want local government to be, right? Public servants collaborating across all branches to protect and celebrate human life.
It is the social compact functioning at 100% capacity.
Perfectly stated.
Now, I need you to hold on to that image. Lock the warmth, the functionality, and the mutual respect of May 19, 2025 in your mind.
Because it doesn't last.
No, it doesn't, because municipal power is fragile.
Over the course of the following year, the political landscape of Quincy undergoes a massive upheaval.
Right, there's an election.
Yes. A new political faction, utilizing a highly organized, highly targeted campaign, just sweeps the municipal elections.
So they effectively achieve total legislative control.
Total control.
Okay, so you have this beautiful snapshot of governance in 2025. Fast forward exactly 365 days.
Down to the day.
Down to the day. It is now May 19th, 2026. You are in the exact same room, looking at the exact same microphones, but the philosophical floor has completely fallen out from under the chamber.
And David McCarthy is no longer a city councilor.
Right. Following the election sweep, he transitioned out of elected office and stepped into a critical administrative public safety role as the director of Quincy's Emergency Management Department.
We should probably establish what that department actually looks like structurally, just for context.
Yeah, how big is it?
Consists of exactly 2 human beings, Director David McCarthy and his operations manager, a gentleman named Declan.
2 people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so McCarthy is standing before this newly elected council majority to present a standard level services budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
It essentially means asking for the exact same operational funding as last year, just to keep the lights on and maintain the baseline functions.
So no new vehicles, no massive staff expansions.
None of that, just, hey, let us keep doing what we are doing.
Okay. So under normal circumstances, a level services presentation for a 2-person department takes what, like 5 minutes?
The sources characterize it as a coordinated ambush.
An ambush.
Yes. A grueling, highly personal interrogation disguised as fiscal oversight.
Wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
Isn't it completely normal and frankly expected for a newly elected reform-minded city council to aggressively audit the city's department heads? I mean, they just run an election, they have a mandate. Why are the sources classifying this as an ambush rather than just a tough, thorough fiscal review?
It's a crucial question. The distinction between fiscal oversight and an ambush lies in the nature of the questioning itself.
Okay, how so?
Oversight seeks to understand metrics, right? Efficiency, deployment of capital. But the transcripts show that this new majority bloc, Councilors Riley, McKee, Yuan, Jacobs, and President Mahoney, they did not ask about hazard mitigation planning.
They didn't.
No. They didn't ask about federal grant compliance or disaster logistics. Instead, they engaged in a systematic, rhetorical diminishment of the department's very existence. They relied on deliberate obfuscation of what emergency management actually does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the tape. Counselor Deb Riley takes the microphone first. She doesn't ask about emergency protocols. She starts by complaining that McCarthy didn't formally introduce himself to her properly when they took office.
Which is a very personal grievance.
Very. She claims she has never seen a job description for his role. And then she dismissively reduces his entire critical public safety function. She claims on live television that his role is just overseeing, quote, events and celebrations and games.
Just completely minimizing the entire job.
And the rhetorical baton is immediately passed to Counselor Maggie McKee, who tags in and echoes this exact same diminishment.
Almost word for word in sentiment.
Yeah. McKee takes the microphone and minimizes the entire emergency management apparatus to handling, quote, concerts and free jacks.
And then, without any further debate about operations or safety protocols, McKee formally makes a motion on the floor to fire him.
Wait, she motions to reduce the department budget?
No, she explicitly makes a motion to cut his exact director salary line item, which is line 5100014 from the city budget.
So terminating his employment instantly. They are attempting to completely zero out his livelihood on live television based on the premise that he plans parades.
It's wild. But the interrogation doesn't stop with the motion.
Right, because Counselor Susan Ewan jumps into the fray next.
Yes.
She starts grilling McCarthy on his work hours, specifically his weekend and evening availability.
Yeah.
She points out that he works a standard 8.30 to 4.30 administrative shift.
Okay.
And she complains that if residents have an emergency after hours, they have to call 911.
Which is where that devil's advocate argument of legitimate oversight completely falls apart.
Oh, really? Why?
Because from a purely administrative and public safety perspective, Counselor Ewan's argument represents a fundamental, almost dangerous misunderstanding of municipal emergency systems.
Explain the mechanism there. Why is her argument about the 8.30 to 4.30 schedule flawed? I mean, emergencies happen at night, right?
Of course they do. But emergency management directors are not 911 dispatchers. They do not sit by a radio console at 2:00 a.m. waiting for a localized resident to call about a flooded basement or a noise complaint.
Right, that's what the dispatch center's for.
Exactly. That is exactly what the multi-million-dollar 911 dispatch center is designed for. Emergency management handles the macro-level architecture of public safety.
The big picture stuff.
Yes. They write the complex federal grants that fund the police and fire departments. They maintain the city's compliance with FEMA so that when a hurricane hits, the city is legally eligible for millions in federal reimbursement.
Okay, so it's a lot of paperwork and planning.
They draft the hazard mitigation plans required by the state. It is highly technical, deeply administrative work that is absolutely conducted during standard municipal business hours when state and federal agencies are actually open.
So basically, criticizing the emergency management director for not taking 2:00 a.m. emergency calls is like criticizing the hospital's chief financial officer for not performing open heart surgery in the emergency room.
That is a perfect analogy. It fundamentally misrepresents the job.
Yet, Counselor Yuan uses this administrative schedule to declare his role redundant and claims that eliminating his job entirely will save taxpayers money.
And then it gets even more surreal. The council president, Ann Mahoney, who is supposedly there to oversee the decorum of the entire meeting.
All right, she holds the gavel.
She leans into her microphone to openly mock the director. She laughs and states that his actual role is just, quote, helping pull the trailer for the function for the parades.
Let me stop right here because I really need to try and contextualize this for the listener because this is baffling.
It is.
Emergency management isn't the firefighter holding the hose. When a massive blizzard hits, you don't see them on the street, but they are the ones sitting in the emergency operations center, making sure the state salt trucks, the FEMA relief funds, the police dispatchers, and the hospital power grids are all actually talking to each other.
Right. They are the central nervous system of the response. What's fascinating here is to understand the sheer hostility and the total disregard for public safety in this interaction.
We have to look at the history between these specific human beings.
Yes. Because before this new majority bloc held the gavel, many of them were political activists.
These specific activists routinely disrupted city council meetings from the public gallery for years.
They were the ones yelling from the back of the room.
Interrupting proceedings, refusing to yield the floor.
And who was the city councilor at that time who constantly demanded decorum?
It was David McCarthy.
It was David McCarthy. He was famously on the record from his seat at the dais, warning these exact same activists that he would suspend or stop the meetings entirely if their unruliness continued to disrupt the legislative business of the city.
So the dynamic is completely inverted.
Entirely.
It is a terrifying realization. The activists from the gallery have captured the seats. They now possess the institutional power of the budget.
And they are using the highly public, televised forum of a municipal hearing to systematically humiliate the man who used to tell them to follow the rules.
This isn't fiscal conservatism. It's a televised execution for a perceived slight. Like a hostile corporate takeover where the new board of directors publicly fires the building's lead safety inspector. Not because he failed at his job, but simply because years ago he asked them to be quiet in the lobby.
That's exactly what it is. Which brings us to the concept of asymmetrical political warfare.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, when one faction decides that the rules of decorum, professional respect, and basic public safety are secondary to personal retribution, the system has no immune response.
Because the system assumes good faith.
Exactly. The system assumes everyone wants to govern. If a faction only wants to punish, the guardrails fail. This proceeding was about to cross the line from aggressive political theater into outright deliberate cruelty.
Yeah, the shift in tone becomes incredibly dark when Councilor David Jacobs takes the floor.
Jacob starts recounting an incident during a severe blizzard where the city had to open an emergency warming center at North Quincy High School.
Which is a standard protocol, right?
Absolutely. Standard emergency management protocol during extreme weather events. When residents lose power and face hypothermia risks, you open a warming center.
Okay, so what's his issue?
But instead of discussing the logistics of the shelter or how to improve emergency communications, Jacobs uses his time on the microphone to mercilessly mock the operation. He starts by complaining about the unplowed parking lot at the high school.
During a blizzard.
During an active blizzard. He complains about a lack of signage pointing to the entrance. He sarcastically mocks the fact that upon entering the shelter, he was greeted by a retired police sergeant who was peacefully reading a David McCullough book on John Adams. It is a deliberate attempt to paint the emergency personnel as lazy or disengaged, completely ignoring the reality that a warming shelter is largely a waiting game until residents actually arrive.
Right, you're literally just holding the space open. Jacobs complains bitterly into the microphone that there was no food for people who might have needed the shelter.
He feigns this deep, empathetic concern for the hungry, freezing citizens of Quincy.
But he doesn't stop there. He immediately pivots from feigned concern to a shocking, arrogant brag. Jacobs says into the microphone on live television, quote, "But don't worry, there was food for us because I got invited to come back to Marymount and have lunch."
It reveals a staggering lack of self-awareness.
David McCarthy, a man who has given 20 years of his life to serving this exact community, is standing at the podium.
Taking it all in.
He is watching his career, his department, the retired police officers who volunteer in blizzards, and his personal dedication be mocked and dragged through the mud by someone bragging about a private lunch.
McCarthy interrupts the monologue, pleading, and I'm quoting here, "Can I comment on that? Can I comment on that? Can I have my hand?"
He is literally asking for permission just to raise his hand and speak in defense of his professional record. It is the sound of a public servant being stripped of his dignity in real time.
And what does Councilor Jacobs do? Does he yield the floor? Jacobs coldly and abruptly silences him, stating flatly, "I'm still speaking." If we analyze the psychological impact of this specific moment, it is profound. By deliberately denying a public servant the fundamental right to respond to aggressive attacks on his professional record, the council majority completely abandoned any pretense of fiscal oversight.
Right, because this was no longer about the city budget.
No, this was a public exercise in demoralization.
While Jacobs delivers this cruel monologue while he brags about his lunch and while he silences McCarthy, the council president offered no call for decorum. No one attempted to steer the conversation back to municipal finance. They functioned as a unified, complicit front, endorsing the humiliation through their silence.
The illusion of a unanimous mandate was fractured by veteran members of the government who desperately tried to inject logic back into the proceedings.
Councilor Ash takes the microphone and directly calls out the elephant in the room. He looks at his colleagues and warns the entire chamber that this interrogation, quote, does sound personal.
Then you have Councilor DeBona, who decides to systematically dismantle the fiscal argument that Councilor Yuan tried to make. Remember, Yuan claimed that firing the emergency manager would save taxpayers money. She framed this as a heroic act of fiscal conservatism.
So DeBona takes the microphone and breaks the actual math down for the public.
Let's actually do the math here because it is absurd. DeBona points out that eliminating this specific department saves the average taxpayer roughly $8 a year. He literally references the math on the floor, dividing the average tax bill by the fractional cost of the department's budget. He states it's about $242 divided by a quarter. $8.
Look at your own local tax bill right now, listener. Would you trade your city's federally mandated hazard mitigation plan, your emergency weather response coordination, and your disaster grant writer
For $8 a year.
for $8? It's insane.
And DeBona doesn't just stop at the cost. He reminds the council of the actual tangible return on investment of this department.
The ROI, yeah.
He points to the massive 2018 coastal floods that devastated neighborhoods like Howe's Neck. He reminds them that it was the emergency management apparatus, the very department they are calling parades and free jacks, that successfully recovered $10 million in federal and state recovery funds for the city.
$10 million recovered. Fire the guy to save the price of a fancy coffee.
But the pushback didn't just come from the council minority. The administration itself was forced to intervene to try and stop the bleeding.
Yeah, Chris Walker, the chief of staff of the city, took the microphone to issue a dire, explicit warning to the council on the record.
What does he say?
He stated that eliminating this department would be an, quote, exceptionally large mistake, and that it would result in a definite cut in services that directly, physically harms Quincy residents. He tried to explain that emergency management does the vital, invisible prep work that the fire and police departments entirely rely on during an actual crisis.
He is pleading with...
And how does the council president, Ann Mahoney, respond to this avalanche of logic, the mathematical breakdowns, and the explicit warnings from the administration?
This is perhaps the most shocking singular moment of the entire hearing. In a stunning slip of the tongue on live television, while actively trying to justify cutting McCarthy's job, Council President Mahoney openly confesses to the underlying motive.
Tell them what she said.
She states, "We do have personal issues between us, but it's not personal."
I had to read that sentence in the documents 3 times to make sure it wasn't a typo. We do have personal issues between us, but it's not personal.
It is the sheer, undeniable absurdity of this paradox.
How can a sitting council president admit out loud on the public record to having deep-seated personal issues with a city employee while literally holding the knife to that employee's salary line?
And in the same breath, claim the cut isn't personal.
This makes no sense.
It is a Freudian slip of massive legal and ethical proportions. It completely destroys the alliance's defense that they were acting out of a desire for fiscal efficiency.
Absolutely destroys it.
When the president of the city council admits to a personal grudge right before orchestrating a vote to defund the target of that grudge, it ceases to be government. It becomes a vendetta.
An ongoing campaign of political retribution. And Mahoney's own words validate that framing entirely.
Now, I want to ask you, the listener, a logical question.
Okay.
If a group of newly elected officials truly, genuinely believed that an entire city department was useless, redundant, and a waste of taxpayer money,
What they do.
they would cut the whole department. Right.
Obviously.
That is what actual fiscal conservatives do when they find a useless bureaucracy. They eliminate the entire budget line, close the office, and reallocate the funds back to the general ledger.
But the final mechanics of this vote prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this was never about the department's function.
The mechanics of the final budget cut are incredibly revealing.
Break it down for us.
As the debate raged on and the warnings from the chief of staff hung in the air, Council President Mahoney seemed to realize that eliminating an entire emergency management apparatus looks incredibly dangerous to the voting public.
Right. It leaves the new council majority highly vulnerable to accusations of jeopardizing public safety if a storm hits the next day.
She alters the strategy in real time. Mahoney formally withdraws the original motion to cut the entire department. Instead, she executes a surgical strike. She explicitly states on the record that she is intentionally skipping over line item 512030.
But what's that line item?
That is the salary line for the operations manager, Declan. She says she wants to save him. Instead, she surgically targets only line item 51004.
David McCarthy's salary. She saves the assistant, but fires the director.
This raises an important question. Let's apply basic logic to this maneuver. If the department is supposedly so useless, so redundant, and its duties amount to nothing more than pulling parade trails,
Like she claimed.
why on earth would you keep the operations manager? Why use taxpayer dollars to pay an assistant to run a department that you just spent an hour claiming has no purpose?
You wouldn't. The deduction is inescapable. The emergency management work was never the issue. The goal, exclusively and entirely, was to exact retribution against David McCarthy. They wanted his head on a pike because of the years he spent telling them to behave in the gallery, and they weaponized the municipal budget to do it.
And this surgical strike, this blatant use of public funds for a personal vendetta, opens the door to a much larger extrapolation. It exposes the massive structural hypocrisy of this entire council block and the highly coordinated political network that put them in power to begin with.
Yes, let's talk about the network. Because these councilors didn't just organically appear out of nowhere on Election Day.
Not at all.
This faction, specifically Councilors McKee, Ryan, Yuan, and Jacobs, are deeply tied to outside activist groups like Adjust Quincy and a registered ballot committee called Citizens for Fair Races.
This entire network built their political brand in 2024 by viciously attacking the previous city council and the mayor over municipal compensation.
Okay, what happened in 2024?
The previous council, which included David McCarthy, voted to adjust municipal salaries. They approved a 79% raise for the mayor to adjust for a 9-year gap where his salary was frozen,
9 years, wow.
and a 50% raise for the city council.
And the activists seized on this. They weaponized these votes, branding the incumbents as greedy, corrupt, and completely out of touch with the working-class taxpayer.
Right.
They used this manufactured moral outrage to build a massive data mining operation.
Let's explain how this data mining actually works mechanically, because it is a brilliant, if cynical, piece of asymmetrical political warfare.
It really is.
The activists launched what they called an anonymous petition drive in the summer of 2024. When you sign a ballot petition, you provide your name, your address, and your signature. It is a legal document.
Right.
They told voters they were signing a petition to legally roll back and stop the raises.
But they never filed the petition. They locked those signatures in a basket.
Instead, they took that data and essentially built a private, micro-targeted database of exactly 7,163 highly activated, angry voters.
And why is that number significant?
In a low-turnout municipal ward election, where maybe only 2,000 people vote in total, injecting 500 angry, hyper-targeted voters off a private list flips the math entirely.
It is a hostile takeover achieved through weaponized data.
They spent a year screaming from the rooftops that anyone who takes a municipal pay raise is a greedy, corrupt politician who needs to be removed from office. That was their entire organizational identity.
Another branch of the city government, the Quincy School Committee, quietly voted themselves a pay raise.
And what was the reaction from Adjust Quincy and Citizens for Fair Raises regarding the school committee's raise? Let me guess. Massive protests. Outrage in the streets.
Absolute deafening silence. Zero backlash. Zero petitions. Sitting school committee member Courtney Perdios received that raise. And Courtney Perdios' husband, Steve Perdios, is a prominent, embedded, high-level operative within the Citizens for Fair Raises and Adjust Quincy network.
He is literally on television speaking on behalf of the ballot committee.
Exactly. It is the ultimate hypocrisy. They weaponized the very concept of public compensation to systematically destroy their political rivals, branding men like David McCarthy as greedy and corrupt, while their own inner circle quietly pocketed the exact same kind of cash with absolutely no protest.
They used the idea of fiscal responsibility as a sword against their enemies and as a shield for their friends.
It proves that their crusade was never about municipal finance. It was never about protecting the taxpayer. It was calculated, selective political warfare.
They manufactured outrage to hijack the local government, and once they had the power, they used it to settle old scores while their allies cashed the checks.
So what does this all mean? We have to look at what this all means for you, the listener, and for the covenant of the social compact we discussed at the very beginning.
We have to look at how this council majority chose to govern once they actually captured the institution.
And the absolute final insult to the voters they manipulated is how they handled their own compensation. What did this new council block do with their own greedy, corrupt 50% city council pay raises once they took power?
That's the million-dollar question.
And remember, their entire ballot petition in August 2025 conveniently deleted any mention of rolling back the city council salaries because they were actively running for those exact seats.
Convenient.
So once they won, did they immediately pass a city ordinance to repeal the raises and return the salaries to the previous levels?
Let's look at the legal mechanics of their hypocrisy. They absolutely did not repeal the raises.
Shocking.
In municipal law, passing an ordinance to repeal a salary scale is permanent. It changes the city bylaws.
They campaigned on killing the raise, and instead they just put it in a savings account for themselves.
Devastating to the concept of the social compact.
It really is.
By governing exclusively for a fringe faction of 7,163 targeted voters, by ignoring the hypocrisy of their own inner circle, and by using the city budget to settle a decade-old gallery grudge.
This council has completely shattered the spiritual covenant.
They are treating municipal government not as a sacred duty to protect the public, but as a mechanism for settling scores and securing their own power.
And this is where I want to speak directly to you, the listener, because it is so incredibly easy to tune out local politics.
People do it all the time.
It is easy to ignore municipal budget hearings as boring, bureaucratic noise. You might think it doesn't affect you. But this deep dive proves that local politics is not abstract. It directly determines your baseline physical security.
Look at your own city.
Right. If you live in a coastal city facing massive weather events, coastal flooding, blizzards, and hazardous material risks, if your city allows its politicians to fire its emergency management director out of sheer spite, it is you, the citizen, who is left unprotected when the storm hits.
It is your neighborhood that floods, while the politicians argue about who was rude in the lobby 10 years ago.
The social compact relies on the assumption that adults are at the wheel, that the people holding the power recognize the spiritual duty of that power.
And when that assumption is proven false, the entire system of public safety is compromised.
I want to leave you with one final, chilling thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
Okay.
Think about the future. What happens when the next actual natural disaster hits this city? The people currently in charge of managing the fallout, the state agencies, the federal FEMA grant writers, the surrounding municipalities, they will remember exactly how this city council treated David McCarthy.
They absolutely will.
They will remember how a dedicated public servant was mocked on television and fired for personal vengeance. So ask yourself, will anyone competent, will any true professional ever be willing to step up for a community that allows its emergency managers to be used as political target practice?
It is a question that strikes at the very heart of civic duty. When you systematically destroy the dignity of public service, you eventually run out of public service.
And suddenly that expectation of safety, that social compact we take for granted, feels very, very fragile.